hard on my computer, and I have never figured out what I was supposed to do with you. But I went home and stuck it next to my computer. It's been there for years.
Okay.
And I've been trying to figure out, I owe you something, Mel. What is it?
No, I can't remember what it is.
I can't
So
either. I'm
whatever,
glad.
whatever debt that might have been
No.
is absolved.
It's a funny thing. It's sitting on my desk, and I said, it was to remind me to do something. And it's been there for years.
I think the line is, I'm not sure what to do with you. Yes. You've been told that before, okay?
Good morning and welcome to the February 21st, 2025 meeting of the Pima County Election Integrity Commission. Commissioner Stradel, please.
Everybody please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, go ahead. Sit next to the first, yeah.
Roll call. Commissioner Cinnamon.
Present.
Commissioner Delage.
Here.
Commissioner Mason. Commissioner Caswell. Commissioner Juarez. Commissioner Stewart.
Here.
Commissioner Smith Matt. Commissioner Stradel.
Here.
Commissioner Smith Tiana.
Here.
Director Hargrove.
Present.
And the chair is here. I believe we have a quorum, but it's going to repeat. Call to the public. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to address the commission for a maximum of 3 minutes? Seeing no hands, we'll move on. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to the meeting minute summaries for the January 17th, 2025 meeting? Seeing none, those minutes will stand approved. We have one item on the agenda today. Usually we have a real short or a real long meeting. Depends on how it's built. A presentation by Audit USA members Ken Bennett, Electioner John Brickey, and Better Election Software. Mr. Brickey, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me turn this on, and we'll get started. Rosie, can you go ahead and turn that one on too?
John, before you get started, any of the commissioners that would like to move to a better seating
No,
position
no
so they
better.
can see what's on the screen?
Okay,
Feel free to do
well, I'm
so.
going to turn that on
Okay.
right now. And
Does he know there's no battery? John, the battery.
what?
The battery?
Oh, that's right. I didn't get a battery in there yet. There you go. Sorry, everybody. Little things that if we got rolling was on. That's a new battery.
Perfect.
You ready?
I'm ready.
First off, I want to thank you for inviting Audit USA for being here and to do this presentation. It's a real honor. I want you to know that you're the oldest commission in the country that meets like this and oversees elections. And we're looking to try to help assist again, starting some other commissions, hopefully in Santa Cruz County, in Cochise, Pinal, and follow the model that you all have built. Because it really is important in these times that we get people to fight the cynicism in this country that's going on when it comes to elections. Because the gossip, the innuendos are very painful. And we started Audit AZ 20 years ago, okay? and became Audit USA. And what we're going to wind up, let's see if I can, my little mouse I should have pressed. Our first speaker is going to go ahead and be Bill Reisner. And Bill Reisner and I go back from the very, very beginning of Audit USA. And he's going to explain somewhat of the history that what happened or whatever. For those who don't know Bill, he's been an attorney for what, 56 years now? 57. And he's getting pretty close to retiring. He's only got one case left, me, okay? And then the next speaker after Bill is going to go ahead and be Ken Bennett. Ken Bennett, me, well, we may not vote the same way, but he feels about democracy and elections as much that I do. And we have just become really great friends, and he's going to go ahead. He's an excellent speaker, and you're really going to
Don't build it up too much, John.
Okay, well, that's what I do, whatever. And, you know, on that, and I get this other mouse, hand mouse fixed, when Bill gets up here. So anyway, this is some of the stuff that Bill, just to let you know who he really is, because it's kind of nice to know that you got one of the best election attorneys, I think, in the country. We've done probably together, maybe in the state of Arizona, probably 12 to 15 cases together over the last 20 years. Basically, when we do litigation, we do mostly writs of mandamus. And we challenge people to say, gee, Your Honor, could you please order that person to follow the law, because they're not. Or public records requests. You know, we have a strong conviction that elections aren't any good unless they're transparent, trackable, and publicly verified, more now than any time in history. And what we're here to do is to get you to understand this program that we built called AIB. And I want you to know, we didn't build the program. They probably spent, you know, $30, $40 million, Microsoft did. And Microsoft Excel, we're gonna blow your mind what you can do with it. And all we did was we knew what buttons to push, and we built a macro. And we're going to show you how it works. We have a 5-minute video, because I want to fumble on my computer pushing different buttons. I'm going to show you how simple this program is and what it can do for counties who use it, because when you sign that certified report, we're going to have a system that you don't have to go to the boxes to look at the envelopes, the ballots. You can go directly to CVRs, and this system will wind up building one CVR, all hyperlinked. You're going to see a video here that in 93 seconds, we hyperlinked 736,000 images into the CVR, and you just click on it, and the image pops right up, and you can follow the whole row. Ken's going to explain all of that, and Bill. So anyway, I'm going to have Bill come up here. He's going to talk for about 10 or 12 minutes, and then Bill will introduce Ken. And then Ken will come up and he tells a really interesting situation about elections and his experience being a ambassador of elections. So anyway, Bill, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, John. And it's a pleasure for me to be able to talk to people that advise our Board of Supervisors on elections. Because, you know, the Arizona Constitution, there's a specific provision that says increase democracy. Whoever gets the most votes is elected. And it's the Board of Supervisors that run our elections in Arizona. The Secretary of State certainly set some rules on how ballots are transmitted and things like that, but the responsibility is the Board of Supervisors. So it's nice to be able to talk to people who can advise them, because I've had a lot of history with them. I wanted to mention a little bit about my background. We moved to Tucson when I was in 4th grade, so I've certainly been here a long time. But I'm from eastern Kentucky, little town, 120 people, 2 T intersection, 2 dirt roads. My dad had a general store. was elected to the legislature from there, and he wasn't around much. My mom's running the store. That's where the post office was, where the pork shop run. And I pretty much grew up sitting on the porch talking to people. And so they come and they talk and they whittle. And as a little kid, I picked up the attitudes. And certainly there was a strong attitude about elections and what the proper role of people was in, that were in office. So I became a lawyer in 1968. In 1970, I represented the Democratic Party in Pima County, challenging a redistricting by the Republicans that were temporarily in control. And we were successful in that challenge. I handled a number of cases since then. And, you know, as part of a group that was trying to kind of clean up the elections in the county, shall we say, you know, with rules on what the computers are connected to, one thing or another, to make sure that we could improve the accuracy of the elections. You know, one of the things that's difficult about elections is that a lot of people like to cheat, you know, starting from the earliest in our country. There's the history of that. But it's different. It's different than, let's say, criminals that try to steal or something. Some people aren't paid to cheat, but it's patriots that generally is the biggest problem. Because people that think that they know what's really in the best in public interest, and if other people knew what they knew, they would agree with them, that sort of thing. So we have two of those things. We need to trust democracy, and we need to, everybody needs to know on winning and losing. So at one point, I can tell you about a case, we call it the database case, where finally the Democratic Party in Pima County asked the Board of Supervisors, we want to look at your computer saved data of past elections. And it was the damnedest thing. The county probably spent $1 million defending that. It was unbelievable. I had one deposition of just a guy that took a photograph, and they had 3 lawyers in the room for this thing. But there were a couple of interesting aspects of it. One, of course, the Pima County attorney represented the Board of Supervisors. The Democratic Party didn't want to have over this. They passed a resolution unanimously asking the Democratic-controlled county to cooperate with the party and not make a suit to get the database. But we had this. And then I wanted to take the deposition of some workers of the election department. Pima County attorney filed a motion to, wait a minute, every single person in that election department will take the 5th Amendment. I was kind of astonished because, you know, I'd seen that motion where you want to take someone's deposition and it may come into some criminal area, and then that person, you know, has First Amendment right, and their 5th Amendment that they can remain silent. But here the Board of Supervisors says every single person in that election department could take the 5th and could so forth. So they actually lost the motion. I got to take depositions, and sure enough, each one of them talked about what went on, and there were crimes. because, you know, nothing happens, 'cause that's where it goes. But, it was interesting, and then during the case, the Pima County wanted to take the deposition of the office of the Secretary of State. So there's a provision where you can do that, and then the Secretary of State put forward a guy named Joe Canfield, who was very knowledgeable and who was the election director at the time, as the person who would answer on behalf of the office as to what their policies were. So I asked Joe, well, the county had some questions, and I had some. I said, has your department ever looked at any county in Arizona to see what went on in the elections by checking the computers out or anything like that? He said, oh no, we've not done that. And he said, of course, he doesn't know of any county that's ever done that either. But what was interesting to me was he said he couldn't do it because they didn't have the authority, the Secretary of State, to check what each county was doing in terms of the computer. I said, well, you know, you set rules about what can be connected to the computer, what room it's in. You have certain rules like that. Did you ever check to see if they're following those rules? He said, no, we don't have authority to do that. So it's really, and I think it's true, because the authorities relate to, they have is how ballots are transmitted, how things like that. But the responsibility for doing it right is the Board of Supervisors' responsibility, and they can't come in and check on it. During that database game, it became obvious to us that why they were fighting so hard was frankly because they had cheated on the RTA. That was our working conclusion. We didn't have any evidence because in Arizona, after every bond election, the counties have to burn and destroy the ballots in 6 months. It's quite clear that law is the case. But it turned out, much to our surprise, Pima County had kept those ballots, and they were in Iron Mountain in storage. So we had a lawsuit saying, hey, we want to, well, no, we didn't have a lawsuit. Pima County had the lawsuit. Pima County said, oh boy, we gotta destroy those ballots, but it looked bad if we just burn them up, you know. So well, why don't we ask the judge what we have to do? And so they filed a declaratory judgment action and said, Judge, there's a question about what our responsibilities are with these ballots from the RTA. And then they sued the Democratic Party, the Green Party, and the Republican Party, so these parties can come in and talk about it. Well, on behalf of the Democratic Party and the Libertarian Party, we said, hey, wait a minute. We think that you guys cheated in that election. There's a lot of evidence, and we want the court to take control of these ballots, and we want to look at them because we have some suggestions for what needs to be done in the future as they need to be scanned and so on. So, oh boy, that stirred up a minute. So the county made a motion to dismiss the case, and then the RTA came in, and the RTA said, boy, you know, and this was a motion to dismiss, and what it is in the law is they say if we proved everything that we could prove, you still can't be in court. So the whole thesis of the motion was, yeah, they cheated, but sorry, they can't be here. So the RTA guy said, boy, you know, you got to consider how important all these people are on the board, and if it finds out that election was cheated, imagine how they'll feel. And then the county says, well, you know, you can't be here in court. And the judge says, yeah, I think that's right. You know, maybe you can go to the legislature or something, but you can't come to court just because the election was stolen, and that's nothing we can hear. And that judge was Charles Harrington, who's a fine man. He was, in my opinion, maybe one of the best judges in our court. But when it came to stand up against the establishment, he folded. So he dismissed, saying you can't come to court. And then, of course, he was an elected chief judge. The judge said, "You're our top guy." So the Court of Appeals reversed, and it came back. And then we got Kyle Bryson, who's a very congenial judge. And so Bryson said, "Boy, can't make the same motion again." So we're there again, where it's assumed that the election was rigged. And he says, "You know, you want to scan these ballots, you want to, there's things that would make so they couldn't cheat, but really I don't have power for that. Most I can do is just tell them not to do it again." And so he dismissed the case. And he was elected, of course, thereafter chief judge. So there's a couple lessons for me, which is that you need to make sure that the elections are run right in the first place, because there's nobody that's going to stand in the way of rigged elections. With some of the best judges wouldn't do it, and I don't think that do it tomorrow either. There are things that you can do that to make sure that the elections are correct, and John's going to talk about some of those things later. But really, the responsibility to protect democracy, the responsibility to do the elections right, is here in each county. That's how it works in this state. Thanks.
Ken Bennett just stepped out, and I put some slides up here, and I just want you to know is that you say the Constitution on when it comes to voting, the actual act of voting is the secret process. When it comes to counting, that is a public process, and I remember, Bill is a brilliant attorney, and he's done some incredible research for us, and going back to in the early days before we had the lever machines, how they counted votes. And when the polls closed, people would come in, they would hand count, and then they would wind up having a string set up, and they'd punch a hole in the ballot, and people could walk by and take a look at it. That's how, it's important sometimes to look back. Anyway, here's Ken Bennett, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce him too. That's what he is, guys. He really is. I can't believe this guy, working with him. The experience that we shared together in a foxhole, okay? Yeah, because we were in a foxhole. We were the only two real experts inside.
He's talking about the Maricopa County audit in 2021.
You got it.
All right, I'm done. Okay,
And here is your mouse, my friend.
Okay, good. Let's get out. Oh, I'm probably wondering what's the telephone. We have a dear friend in Prescott who finally had to move out of her home. She's 98 years old. And on her wall was one of the old crank phones. Someone was asking about that just a few minutes ago. Yes. The Millers, right? Okay. Anyway, she gave it to us and took a picture, and somehow John pulled that down off the internet, and that's the picture I'm now associated with. But anyway. Okay. I was the 18th Secretary of State, 2009 to 2015. I think that happened because I had been a state senator in 99 to 2007. I was in the Senate working with Ted Downing. I don't know when you were there, Ted, maybe a little later, but about the time I was at the Senate, 03 to 07, about the time that the RTA election occurred down here and lots of controversy, and this commission was formed as part of that. Because I had worked with then Secretary of State Jan Brewer, when the whole debacle occurred in Florida, 2000, the hanging chads, In 2002, Congress passes the Help America Vote Act. Some call it the Hack America Vote Act, but it's the Help America Vote Act. And because I had worked with Secretary of State Brewer, when she became governor in '09, when Janet Napolitano left to be on President Obama's cabinet, she appointed me Secretary of State to finish her term. I have recently accepted, about 20 days ago, a position as chair of the Board of Audit USA. Now, originally, my first interactions with John Brakey were I started hearing from my Secretary of State staff that there was this big controversy going on down in Pima County, and there were a couple of guys, John Brakey and Jim March or something, stirring up troubles, and I tried to keep an open mind, and sure enough, over the years, we've gone from being skeptics of each other, perhaps, to we ended up being the Republican and Democrat liaisons in the audit that the state Senate did 3 or 4 years ago for the Maricopa County election in 2020. So we have come to the conclusion, and he's known this long before I did, that the problems in elections are complicated, or appear to be, but the solutions are simple. It's basically transparency and verification. And kudos to Pima County for being the first county in the country to create an election integrity commission like you sit on, to assist, as Bill said, the Board of Supervisors, which really has the power in Arizona state law to conduct the elections in each county. Yes, the Constitution identifies the Secretary of State as the chief elections official of the state of Arizona, but the work really happens at the county level. John mentioned ABE. It's basically using Microsoft Excel with some macros that go get stuff from here and get stuff from there to simply create a transparent way of making sure that the votes on the ballots, which are visible in the ballot images, have been correctly recorded in the cast vote record, the record of the votes cast. So we call it ABE, but it basically allows election officials to do two things. For years I would hear, well, in elections you can have speed or you can have accuracy, but you can't have both. Well, we need to break through and realize that that's exactly what the public demands. They want speed. I mean, everything's, you get in a line, and if your food isn't in your car in 45 seconds, it's free, or some of these places that used to do that. So they want speed, but of course we want accuracy. And so what we're trying to do is help, and it's extremely critical whenever there's a close election. If there's a blowout election, nobody cares. My first elected opportunity to serve was in my hometown of Prescott. It was 1984. I was 25 years old. I ran for the Prescott City Council, and there were 3 seats available. One guy got more than 50% in the primary, so he got elected. The other 2 seats went to the next 4 of us. We had a runoff. I happened to get the most votes, but the second guy won over the third candidate by 3 votes. 3 votes made the difference between somebody winning a seat on the Prescott City Council or none. And whenever there's a margin in an election, you divide that by half. So it only took, if 2 people in that election had voted for the third guy instead of the second guy, it would have been a different result. So in close elections, transparency and the ability to publicly verify what's going on, what happened, and that we did it accurately is important. Verifying results down to the precinct level. A lot of talk about, there's a bill in the legislature, and it'll probably will be vetoed by the governor. So the Republicans will turn it into a ballot measure that will be on our ballot next year, to go back to forcing everybody to vote at the precinct level. So there's this big push for doing everything back at the precinct level. No voting centers. Go back to the precinct level, and precincts can be no more than 1,000 people. If that bill were to pass, either by vote of the people, or if the legislature and the governor were to sign it. Maricopa County has 2.6 million registered voters. If the maximum precinct size was 1,000, they would have to have 2,600 voting locations every time they have an election. Right now they have about 250, and they use voting centers, and you can vote wherever you want to. Anyway, so a lot of focus at the precinct level. We want to be able to verify that the number of voters matches the number of ballots. Compare the votes in every contest to make sure that the ballot images, the votes on the ballot images, are the ones that were recorded in the cast vote record. Look at probably what are the potentially problematic areas: undervotes, overvotes, write-ins. Write-ins almost never decide an election. But if you have races that are being decided by, well, let's see. 2 years ago, the Attorney General of the state of Arizona won an election, statewide election, by about 200 votes. When you have elections that close. Now, I became Secretary of State in 2009. And let me tell you why this is so passionate to me. In 2010, my first statewide election that I had to oversee as a Secretary of State, there were several ballot propositions on the statewide ballots in all 15 counties. And one of them, I think it was Prop 208 if I remember, it was this little bitty thing that changed the filing deadlines on when to submit petitions for things. And so it was not a big deal, and sure enough, after counting about 2 million ballots statewide, that proposition was losing by 126 votes out of 2 million. And I can remember like it was yesterday, my Deputy Secretary of State, who's now a Maricopa County Superior Court judge, Jim Drake, coming into my office. He says, "Secretary Bennett, for the first time in the history of the state, we are going to trigger a state statute that says if a statewide election is within 200 votes, winner loser, you have to do a statewide recount." And I go to bed that night, and I'm an accounting major, and I'm thinking, okay, 2 million ballots. We got to count them again. If the second count is 99% accurate to the first count, we could be off by 20,000 votes. If we're 99.9% accurate in the second count to the first count, we could be off by 2,000 votes. If we're 99.99% accurate, counting the second time to the first time, we could have a difference of 200 votes, and instead of the thing losing by 126, maybe it won by 74. And I, as the Secretary of State, would have to stand up in front of the state of Arizona and say, "Sorry, we told you that failed. We recounted and it passed."
Which one do you trust?
Now, how much confidence would that instill in Arizonans to announce that just one recount changed this election? I did not sleep that night, thinking, I've got to call 15 county election directors and county recorders tomorrow morning and tell them, get all the boxes back out, get enough machines back out to program them to recount, and we got to count 2 million ballots. Well, we did that. And luckily, about a week later, when all 15 counties had reported their results, the results of that election changed by 42. Instead of losing by 126, it lost by 168. Well, at least it was the same result. And we went looking. We looked at every one of the almost 1,600 precincts in 15 counties of Arizona. Where were there differences? In 99-point-some% of the precincts in all 15 counties, there was no difference between the first count and the second count. Exactly the same. There were a few here and there that changed by 1, changed by 2, changed by, and some went this way and some went that way, but we get down to page 36 in Maricopa County, and one precinct changed by 30 votes. So I called the county recorder and the county election director from Maricopa County. Ladies, what happened? Well, we don't know. So they called the 8 people that worked at that precinct that day. Finally, one guy says, I think I know what happened. At about 11 o'clock, I looked behind the machine and there were a bunch of ballots on the floor. Somebody had set the door of the machine so when you fed the ballots in, instead of going down into the hopper, they had gone out the back of the machine and were on the bottom, on the floor. So we decided that in an abundance of caution, we'd run back through, make sure they were counted. Well, in doing so, they probably double counted those 30 or 40, ballots. When they recounted the election a week later, they didn't make that mistake. And so that one precinct changed by 30. The whole state changed by 42. If you subtracted that one precinct of 30 from the state changed by 12 votes out of 2 million. I think that's an accuracy percentage of 99.9994% or something. But that's how close elections can be. Okay, see if there are enough questionable votes to alter an outcome, and maybe that helps you reduce litigation and calls for recounts or whatever. Okay, I just want to share my 5 key principles or steps or whatever for ensuring elections with integrity. One is integrity in the voter registration system. Now, this can mean different things to different people. Some people are totally focused on, has the voter proved citizenship and on and on and on. To me, integrity in the voter registration system is as simple as state law already says that the list of voters and their names and addresses are public records. Yes, there's about 8,000, I think, Arizona voters whose names are allowed to be redacted and their address because they're battered wives, or they are judges, or they are police officers, or whatever. But the other 4.3 million Arizonans in every county, we know a name and we know an address. With that level of transparency, you can go to a county and say, okay, in Yavapai County, how many Kenneth Roy Bennett's are there? And even better, you can go to 2150 Ewan Drive and see that, is there a Kenneth Roy Bennett registered there? If so, fine. If there's a Kenneth Roy, and a Ken, and a Kenny, and a Ken Roy, and a Ken R, and then we got a problem. Now, in some rare occasions, there might be a Kenneth Roy Bennett Sr. and a Kenneth Roy Bennett Jr. So just verify that election that I talked about that we verified the statewide recount. We did this at the Secretary of State's office. We took the database, how many voters voted at any particular address. Usually it was 2, 3, 1, 4. We hit a address in Maricopa County, 438 voters at one address. We thought we had discovered some big problem. We run out there in our cars. It's a retirement home.
Okay.
And there were 100 people that lived in it, 438 of them voted in the election, no problem. At least you checked. Second fundamental principle is once you've made sure that the voter registration system is who it is, you make sure that only people from that list are voting. Pretty simple, but one of the things that's captured in an election is who voted. Not how you voted, of course, but did you vote, yes or no? It's called your voter history. And every time an election occurs, every voter in the registration system gets a yes or no as to whether they voted in that election or not. Everyone that voted in an election should have been on the registered voter list. Third is, does the number of ballots equal the number of people that voted? Pretty simple, but needs to be verified. 4, and this is what we're basically here talking to you about today, is we've developed a tool. We're not trying to sell it. We're just trying to make it available. If you don't want to use our tool, there are some other tools around the country. So we are not here as a vendor trying to convince you, to convince the Board of Supervisors to use something. We're just saying that we have a tool available that helps primarily in this number 4 key area. Every time a ballot goes through a machine, the machine takes a picture of it. And then the programming from the election management system is basically looking for black dots in certain key locations on that ballot image. And black dots in certain places mean that a black dot here is a vote for Smith, a black dot here is a vote for Jones, a black dot here is a vote for Garcia. This critical step is basically saying, look at the ballot images and then look at the record of those votes that's in a spreadsheet called a cast vote record. A spreadsheet has rows and columns. And each row is a particular ballot. Row number 100 is the 100th ballot that was processed in the election. The columns are Smith and Jones and Garcia and Bennett and Breakey and whatever. And so if you look at ballot 100 and you see that there's a vote for Smith in this race and Jones in that race and Garcia in that race, you go to the cast vote record and simply confirm that it recorded a vote for those people in those races. That's all that's happening here. There's a fifth kind of cherry on the top. If you ever needed to, you can use the paper ballots to verify that the ballot images were captured correctly by the machines. But those to me are the 5 keys for a transparent, trackable, and publicly verifiable election. There's other things that are important as well, but those are the main 5. Here's a cast vote record. Here's ballot number 1. Now, this is public information from Dane
Yes,
County, Wisconsin? Is this the?
yes,
Okay.
I believe it is. It could be, I forget, but it's, yeah, we got 2 counties up here.
Yeah, we'll show you some data that's publicly out there, some counties. And this is not a new thing for some counties across the country to publish their ballot images and their cast vote record. This is from Dane County, Wisconsin. From a race in what, 18, 20?
This is 2024.
24?
It's just
Okay.
recent.
Okay, so a row on the cast vote record is the ballot. Ballot 12 was the 12th ballot that was processed in that election, and the columns are the choices that they made. We don't know who voted ballot 12, but on ballot 12, they picked Cox and Schiaparelli for governor, they picked Glassman for a controller, and on and on and on. And if you pull up the image of ballot 12, and if you have a system, and that's what Abe does, Abe takes a big file of ballot images, which the county keeps, and the cast vote record, and it simply correlates them. And it hyperlinks them so that you can click on one and see if it's reflected in the other. And this is what Abe does, and Abe is not some big thing that we spend a lot of money. As John said, Abe is basically using Microsoft Excel with some macro programs to say, go get this from there. So you got to tell it, okay, here's where the ballot images are in this folder. The cast vote record is in this folder. We want you to put those together and give us the results in this folder. And that's all Abe does.
Okay, we're in the file folder.
This is a little video explaining how John does
Right
it.
here, Pima County, okay, that's the test we're gonna do. And we're gonna do Dane County, Wisconsin, the 2024 election, okay? So now I am going to go ahead and click on this, okay? And I'm gonna use version 3.6, and I'm gonna open it up. Open. Okay. Now, nothing up here says, I've already checked it. I know that I've activated the macro and Excel will accept it because I gave it permission. You can read these directions, but time is of the essence, so I'm going to kind of go fast here. Click here on this orange, click here to start, okay? Yes, I want to continue. And what I'm going to do up here right now is that let's get ready to tell it how we're going to run it. And it says to me, click to select the folder containing the ballot images. So I'm going to click on that. And then I'm going to go to my C drive again. And once I do it just one time, I should be in good shape. I'm going to go ahead and get those ballot images. And you know, it's asking for file A. So let's find A. Oh, there it is. And then right down here where I'm moving it, you can see Dane County ballot images. Okay, so I'm going to click OK. Now, I'm going to wait for this cursor to stop and say select OK. B. Now I'm going to go to B. This is Dane County results produced by Abe. That's where we're going to store them. Okay, and then I'm going to say OK, because right down here you can see this is lit up. So I'm going to say OK. The cast vote record that's looking for the database because it needs to know where it's coming from and where it is. So I'm going to go to file C. And on this one, I'm going to have to double click it, and there it is. And then I click on it, then you can see it's lit up down here. It says the best. So we're going to open that, and now that is entered. And now this screen pops up, and I just minus it down because it will come back later to be used. To select ballot log, is that, yep, ballot log database, going for that. Then I'm going for the cast vote record, the CVR database, and it's got to know where to look and where to find this stuff. And then where it's marked precincts, that's what we're working with. And then we're going to create CVRs hyperlinked to all ballot images. And we're going to keep them all together. We're not going to separate by precincts because if I do, that will take about 40 minutes. Okay? And
This county, by the way, has
368,000, I'm circling right here, 26 records. And we're going to hyperlink them twice, and we're going to find all the missing ones will be outlined in red. I'm going to turn the clock on. Okay, that's the one I was looking for. Put it down, and I'm going to put it right here because we want to see how long it takes to go ahead and hyperlink 700,000 records and put them onto one sheet. Now, if I was going to do precincts, like I said, it would take about 40 minutes, okay? So, I've got this thing already. I'm not going to do unders, overvotes, write-ins, or separate by precincts. That's another run. I always run this first to have a master sheet all hyperlinked because I'm going to look for undervotes, missing, you know, and this way. You do the presidential race and you find that, gee, look at all the blank ballots, okay? And then you find, if you check it sometimes, that people have circled the circle, they haven't filled in the bubble. It only works if you fill in the bubble. That's how it works. So anyway, I'm going to hit start and continue, and now we're getting ready to go. Okay, preparing CVR files for processing. You'd be surprised how fast this thing can go. Process indicator, adding links and highlighting names. 50 seconds.
John mentioned it's looking for 700,000 records because the 368 times 2, you've got a ballot image and you've got the cast vote record. So that was his reference to 700,000 documents that we're trying to put together.
If you want to start processing that 80% and look for problems, you can. And then when you get final, you can run Abe again, collect all the data, and then it will combine one with the other because you don't want to lose the work that you already did. 1 minute, 28 seconds. Like I said, there's nothing to combine. No. Done. 1 minute and 36 seconds.
That's amazing.
That is pretty fast. There are 646 missing ballot images and 645 missing individual CVRs. We have an explanation for that. Dane County was the first election county in the country that we talked into posting these ballot images online for the public.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, so what it did, there's 368,028 rows, but up at the top there's 2 title rows. So we accounted for 386,026 ballots. And now the ballot image is associated with each ballot. And you can click on that image and see the ballot image and see that did they vote for Harris or Trump, or did they vote for Baldwin or Olson, or And now you can basically, side by side on a screen, you can look at a ballot image and make sure that the votes on that ballot image were correctly recorded in the cast vote record. It's about the same thing.
Next, what I'm going to do is something that I think is just quite incredible. And I'm going to show you how we can take the CBR and get the results off of it by using Microsoft Pivot. So if you follow me on the mouse, I'm going up here to Insert, and I'm lighted up column H, because that's what I want to look at, is column H. And then I'm going to here, and these are recommended pivot tables. And I'm going to use the top one, and it's going to wind up spitting out the results. And here we go, very quick. Okay. And now it's going to open up a new tab, and here it is. Now, what is incredible about this is, first off, you see, it matches 368. We know we have that many records, and then I'll have a chart.
Basically the totals of each column.
The next slide that will show how this thing all
Harris got
matches up.
174,000.
Really slick. You
Trump
can
got
see
85.
sheet
And this
one now, and
Wisconsin
here.
County.
And its results. S-U-L-T-S. Okay. Press. And now let's take a look. Wow, this is a pretty heavy result, but this is incredible. Watch this. I'm going to click on the number, and let's say, gee, there was what? Let's look at undervotes. Okay, there was 1,410. I'm going to click on that. Okay. Wow, look what it just did. It just opened up all of them with undervotes, and it's telling me where they are, that I could go ahead and identify and take a look and see, gee, is that a real undervote or no? And I don't look at undervotes this way, but on a close race that's really close, you can segregate all those undervotes and take a look at them in the race that you want to look at. And this is all undervotes for the president's race, okay? So I wanted to show you that. And of course, there are 3 rows up here at the top, okay? Now we're going to pull it down to here and subtract the 3, 1, 2, 3, okay?
There's your
And it says
1,410.
that we have 1,410, is that correct?
So now you've put all of the undervotes in one place. And you can go through and look at it. And we're going to see some examples in just a couple more slides of how undervotes occur, sometimes intentionally and sometimes unintentionally by the vote. And if you have a race that's decided by 2 or 3 votes, you may find some undervotes that were actually, Arizona's a voter intent state. If there's a question, the county election officials have to try to decide what was the intent of the voter. We'll see that here in a second. Another thing though that you get is you get some information about the different kind of ballot styles. And in this county, for example, they've got a voting jurisdiction out of 368,000 voters that voted. So there's probably, what, 500,000 registered or 600,000? They've got 2 people that are in somewhere where they have their own ballot style just for those 2 people. Because they're in this city council race, but they're in that supervisor district, and then they're in this school board district, and they're in that water district. And by the time you figure all that, sometimes you end up with 2 people in a district, you got to print a specific ballot style for 2 people. Now, most of the other people, there's 32,000 people that use ballot style 56. These, if you had selected, I want a separate Abe cast vote record by precinct, and then you can read it this way, and you can go. Now, you may have seen there forward here, there were some missing. Now, seen there that there were some missing ballot images. Well, in Dane County, Wisconsin, it's a split county, and some precincts are in a different county, and so they have this funky thing in Wisconsin where one county will count the votes for the next county because some of their people are in our, anyway. And so there's Green City and Jefferson County are kind of split between 2 counties. So the counties figure out that the 561 people that are in those areas is the difference between how many votes that were counted and the total that was on the cast vote record. Let me see if I can find the one that here's the one I'm looking, okay. This is an example of an election report that would be printed by the election management system. Pima County uses ES&S. So this is an example of a precinct. Now we've jumped to Somerset, Maryland. And this is an Abe report, and you can see that it's coming up with the same numbers. 447 for this governor and lieutenant governor pair, 332, 332. So obviously we're trying to verify the accuracy of one thing by seeing if the results are the same when we run it under a different system. Here's some example of undervotes or write-ins. If you fill in the box that it's a write-in, now two election workers from different parties have to look at it and say, okay, this person wrote in Gregory Pageant. Was Gregory Pageant in Arizona? You can be a write-in candidate, but you have to do certain things to be a qualified write-in candidate, and then we'll count votes for you. If you're Jonathan Tyler and you just wrote in your own name or your brother's name or somebody, and you're not a qualified write-in candidate, we don't count votes for them, and we don't count none of the above, and usually the biggest one is Mickey Mouse. And Donald Duck usually takes second. So there's write-in issues. Here's an interesting example of a voter in Maryland was voting on all of these constitutional amendments. And instead of filling in the bubble, circled. Oh, these weren't these were actually, no, these were candidates. Instead of filling in the bubble, Chris Van Holler, or whatever this was, circled the name and circled the bubble. Did that 14 times. On 13 of the 14 times, no mark crossed through the bubble, but on one of them, it did. And so it only recorded a vote for that constitutional amendment. All these other votes for this voter were as though they had not cast it. So if you had a race, though, that was decided by one or two, and you had to go back and look at the write-ins, or these undervotes, these would be undervotes. Here's overvotes. Vote for one and they voted for two. Vote for one and they voted for five, or four, or whatever. Now, if they fill in the bubble, the same for everybody, you can't tell which one they... But maybe you hit one that has a hesitation mark where they touched the pen, lifted it up, and then said, oh, no, I really want Dan Cox.
No.
Would you count that as a vote for Dan Cox? I would. If I was sitting at a table and somebody said, we're trying to determine voter intent here, I'd say Dan Cox. If I go back, I can't tell whether this, I mean, the mark for Dan Cox and the mark for Westmore are about the same. I can't tell that. But on that one, this might help you determine that if the adjudication people decided that this vote went to Dan Cox, okay, we're good with that. There's overvotes. I'm going to go a little quickly here. This is another report that comes out of an election management system, Somerset County, Maryland, 6,958. I think this was, John picked this one because you can show it, you can do something with 6,000 or 7,000 voters precincts in about seconds. And you can check by precinct, and there might, I don't know how many precincts they might have had.
And because it's the beta, we want to teach people how to climb a hill before we put you on a mountain.
But here's the magic of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Now you can hyperlink a ballot image and the cast vote record. And you can say, over here, there is a vote in this race for Terry Evers, or Tony Evers. Tony Evers was reflected as the vote recorded in the cast vote record. In this race, is it Josh Call for Attorney General? Yes. What's on the ballot image matches the cast vote record. You want to do that on one ballot? You want to spot check every 15th one? You want to pick a whole precinct and go ballot by ballot? Or do you want to check all 6,942 or wherever it were? Here's some other kind of examples where that person did, their vote was not counted because they circled the circle instead of getting a mark of blackness inside the circle. And if Donald Trump lost or won in this jurisdiction by one vote, that'd be a big deal. That's it. Any questions?
In Pima County,
Okay.
we've been doing checks of ballots after elections. We have a certain number of selected precincts that I believe we go through.
The hand count audit?
The hand count audit.
Okay.
So a couple of precincts, a few races, and the process take 100-ish volunteers, 100-ish, 50-ish to 100-ish volunteers, and better part of a day, or at least, a little bit more than just a morning.
Okay.
And we actually like this system. It works well. It gives us more confidence in the elections than if we didn't have it. But I look at this and I go, well, wait a second. How is this really different other than the scale where you could literally check everything in a comparable amount of time?
And I think the answer is that you've hit the nail on the head, that this is not a hand count. Abe is not a hand count. The hand count audit has existed in Arizona for what now? 25, 30 years?
No.
Who would know?
We did it in 2006. It was Ted Downing who worked on the bill. And that's an interesting story about how we got this thing.
It's
and what
been
they
20
excluded.
plus years, and it's not just Pima County, every county. There's a state statute that says within 24 hours after the close of the polls on Tuesday, they start a hand count. And yes, they have to pick a certain number of precincts, random, and they have to pick a certain number of the mail-in ballots. And it ends up being about a 2% check. Interestingly, the statute says that when you pick 2% of your mail-ins and your precincts, and you count those, that result has to be within 0.5% of the machine count from the day before. If it varies by more than 0.5%, you have to double to about essentially 4% hand count. And if that is not within 0.5%, you have to hand count the whole county. Now, in the 20 plus years we've been doing the hand count audits, no county has ever had a hand count audit that differed by more than 0.5% from the machine count the day before. But we've had elections that were decided by less than 0.5%. So there's been talk about, do we need to lower that threshold or whatever. But the hand count audit is basically a human check to see if humans doing something come up with the same thing the machine's doing. Abe is more of a, we're going to take data that was already captured by the election management system, which was the machines and things, and we're just going to make it available in its entirety and with total transparency, so that if you wanted to do a third check or a complete check, or pick 10 full precincts in the county and say, okay, we're going to look at these 10 precincts, all the ballots in those 10 precincts, and we'll take another day or whatever to do that. But yeah, the little different purpose, but we're trying to accomplish the same thing, establish confidence in the minds of the citizens that everything was cool.
You got a question over here. Chair.
Not a question as much as a comment on Commissioner Stewart's question. The biggest difference between the ABE and the hand count audit is people need to understand when we do the vote tabulations, we're not counting the paper ballots, we're counting the ballot images. That's how ES&S works. I can't speak for the Dominion system, but ES&S, we actually count the images, we don't count the paper ballot. So when you're doing a hand count, you are actually comparing a ballot image count to a human hand count of the paper ballot. It is a significant check on the way the system works.
Yeah.
The biggest thing I found, serving on the Vote Count Verification Commission for a couple of years, is statutorily, every county in the state is required to do a hand count audit.
Yeah.
I think the most, at that time, the most I'd ever seen was 9 counties that participated. And the reason the counties that didn't participate is they couldn't get party participation.
Yeah, the parties didn't agree to send enough people to man the tables, and so they can, so.
You know, the first one ever
the
did
hand
in Pima
count
County,
is-
if I could just jump in, the Republicans boycotted it, and we had to have 2 parties. So we were tight with the Libertarian Party, so they came in, and then they appointed Democrats, and the next day the Republicans showed up. And that's how it worked out, and we were doing it all along. Back in those days, 50% of the vote was actual precincts you could actually count. When we had to count the vote by mail, these were only, at that time, all we could see is batches. Okay? And what did that batch really mean? And for me, when we used to do those audits, when I was involved in it, I used to always compare the numbers, because back in those days, generally the rule of large numbers were working somewhat, and we'd be very, very close that the precinct vote and the vote by mail would be very close, even though you're counting batches. We could see there was not much change. And then in 2000, that all changed because Trump said, hey, don't vote by mail, you can't trust it, go vote at a precinct. And it caused a lot of friction, and all of a sudden, there was just a huge shift. And the shift wasn't fraud, the shift was because people were changing their pattern as what we, and really that audit today wrote the bill, and interesting enough, when he wrote the bill, there's another part of the story, that the counties got together, Pima County and Maricopa, and Brad Nelson, and also Karen Osborne, which was part of the association, said, you know, we really don't want to do these audits, but we'll go along with it, and we'll give you what you want. But you will not check a county race. If you check a county race, we'll kill it. And that's how it went down. Ted?
Yeah, and I should say that Karen Johnson, who's a friend of yours, Karen and I were the ones that negotiated it, and John's right. The counties didn't want it. There's a second thing they didn't want. The most important elections concern money.
Yeah.
And one thing that all the bond issues, which if you look at how much is passed in bond issues versus state budget, actually the bond issues is, I shouldn't say elephant in the room, so I don't give credit to my party, but it's certainly big, and that was the issue. But I just want to make one quick point about the difference, and back to your question about the difference between comparing A to the hand count.
Yeah, over here, yeah.
Let's get exactly the key word here. The hand count audit system began because of the election of Watuki. Remember where McComish won an election when we did one of those recounts? It flipped.
Yeah.
And Tom, I think was his name, was conservative, hyper-conservative Republican, lost, and a more moderate, should wait, it looks like you, in terms of, but a more moderate political position took over. Karen and I, when we tried to put this thing through a hand count, the intention is the same as A. It's to instill each little step we take in election integrity adds a little bit more to the trustometer of a meeting. You want to increase the trust that people have. So, and you can never create complete trust, and I've watched you struggle with many people in your face about this, and you never increase it. But if we could just, each thing we do, as a commission, as an individual, as a designer, is slightly increase the trust. That is the counter to the autocracy and the fear people have. Show them a good system. That's what you two are doing. Both systems are perfect. Not perfect. Both systems bring the trustometer level just a little bit higher.
And able to even bring it higher. That's the whole point. Or clear ballot, or Ray Lex's system.
A question, have you done any work with the 2024 audit in Arizona where we had, for the first time, I believe, two-card ballot? And did that create any problems with it?
Not here, but I've done 2 or 3 card ballots out of Maryland. And you know, let's talk about that, is that anybody can only do, listen, this is Microsoft Excel. The limit is 1,045,000 rows, okay? That's the limit, okay? Now, if you had a 2-ballot system and you went over that, then we would run ballots separately and create 2 sets. One is ballot 1 and one is ballot 2, and that way you would have 2 CBRs, 1 for each ballot. And if it was precincts, we could put them all together and do that. That would be not a problem, okay? And
I think
we are going to
eventually-
build a Microsoft Access one eventually.
Eventually we want to move this into access where there's almost no limit. Because right now, the limitations of Excel itself would not allow this to be used, for example, for Maricopa County. The other 14 counties in Arizona, we could do it right now.
If A was to be used on Maricopa County, I'd break it into 5. Because they have
Supervisor
5
districts.
supervisors districts. And I'd run it that way. And then create, and then combine through access to build the precincts parts or whatever. It's an amazing program. You can see how real simple it really is. And like I said, all we did was to develop a macro to know what buttons to push to save you a lot of time. And we had 45 versions. That's how many versions. Unfortunately,
And we've already talked to a gentleman last night
About
and
another, yeah.
suggested that put this into a web-based thing, and it would be even more simple than John's version of A goes to A and click to fill in this, you know. There's other ways to just
Yeah.
make this even.
the simplest way
We're just
is
trying
we
to
want
get,
to train you guys how to do it. And then you take your images, once we get them freed, we put them in the cloud. And all you mail out is a precinct CVR. Because we want to train precinct committee women and men how to check your own precinct. And when they go knocking on that door and say, "Hi, Mr. Beck, gee, we see you haven't voted." "Well, I don't vote. I gave up on that." You know, because let's put it this way, in this last election, 90 million people didn't vote, okay? And the previous election was 80 million, okay? A lot of people don't vote because they believe what Mark Twain said. You know what Mark Twain said? If voting made a difference, they wouldn't let us do it. There's a lot of that going on out there. I believe.
I want to go back to any,
Let's
go back to any
I could go on.
questions. It's not our intent to keep you
That's right.
here all day or whatever. Any questions from commissioners? We've got some hands in the audience. Do you mind, Brian, if we take some questions from the audience, or would you rather keep it at the commission level?
Let's keep it at the commission level so we don't get in trouble with the county attorney.
Okay. Maybe next time we'll have the public part after, so that maybe we spurred some interest.
All right,
Okay. Commissioner Stewart.
I've got one question, which is, it's a very interesting tool. I'm kind of excited by it, but what would be next?
What would be next is meeting with the county election director and figuring out how to, I mean, there's nothing much to just make it available, but train Pima County officials on how to use it, how to make it better. We're not selling it. We're a nonprofit organization. We're not here trying to sell anything. And as I said earlier, there's other systems. Tarrant County in Texas, and what's the big county in Idaho that includes Boise? There's some counties around the country that are already putting ballot images and the cast vote record on their website or in the cloud or whatever.
We've
And-
helped a couple of people already develop systems on their own. And that was very important because I don't want to be a goddamn vendor. Okay? I did this because I care about my country, my democracy, my children's future and what's coming out and how badly our country is drastically changing. And I believe in the 24 election, we didn't have any violence because Trump won and everybody, you know. And then the Democrats, you know, I always believe if you, you know, being that he's a Republican and I'm a Democrat, when I went into the Maricopa audit, I became hated. I couldn't believe my own party was threatening me, telling me I shouldn't have done it. And here is the biggest recount that ever happened I know of in the last 20 years in the United States. And I am the executive director, and he called me up. And by the way, I wasn't his first phone call, okay? And he called some other guys and says, no way I'm crossing that picket line. Well, it wasn't a picket line because I did not go into what I call the fraud it. Because as a Democrat, I went in there because who I am and what I do and what I can learn. Nothing is fixed in my life until I know why it broke. I want to know why, and that's how my mind works. And so digging in all of this is how we got together.
So I think the next steps, Commissioner Stewart, would be, you know, maybe having some meetings, follow-up meetings with you as the commission, and then between those and maybe something with the department, election department, you would make a recommendation to the board to consider this tool or one of 3 or 4 others that are bouncing around the country.
And what you would need is to buy a separate computer.
Yeah.
You never connect to the EMS. You only export. You treat that computer like it was a public record. It never goes that way. You just bring the data in. You could start writing a day after the election. That's why that combined feature is there. That way, you could, but we want you to be complete.
Yeah, you can
done
start
by
checking.
certification, and you know that if there was a race within 1 vote, you would see everything. And you could determine that. And if you were in Maryland, and
They're
you
not in
call up a
Maryland.
person and say, hey, you two are in a close race. Can you please come in? You have 2 choices. You can have a machine recount, okay, in this Board of Supervisors, or let's say in this school race, where there's only 8,000 people, okay? But you know, to recount your race, we're gonna have to recount 450,000 ballots. How
Take
about if
this,
we just
you
give
look
you
at
the thumb
8,000
drives and
ballots.
teach you how to use it, and you go back and tell us what you wanna do? You have that choice.
Commissioner Cinnamon?
What additional activities would be required of our election department to utilize this?
I would ask Constance.
First and foremost, it would require a law change. Ballot images are not public records. And by digital, because this passbook record is a digital record, it is not a public record.
That's,
But if
wait a
you're
minute.
using the tool within a county.
Wait a minute. Ballot
Hey,
image.
hey, no,
Well, no.
one person at a time.
There is, I just have to say respectfully, there's a difference of opinion as to whether the ballot images are, let me say it this way, can be released by authorization of the board. Is it 16-625? 16?
ARS 16625.
Yeah, ARS 16625 clearly indicates that the Board of Supervisors can authorize, it usually involves a judge agreeing, to make the ballot papers themselves public. That is rarely done. I don't think it's ever been done. The Senate in 2021, when they did the audit of Maricopa County, they basically used the subpoena power of the Arizona State Senate to have Maricopa County deliver the ballots to the audit. But you're right, they never became public record, the ballots. But there's clear indication in 16625 that the Board of Supervisors can release the ballot images if they want to.
They're the
If they
Board of
don't, if they
Elections.
want to just say, no, we want to use a tool, we want to let our election people in Pima County use this tool to verify back to this commission or to themselves or to the board that, yeah, we use this tool to triple check. A little different than the hand count audit that Commissioner Stewart was talking about, but I think the board does have the authority to say, we can use this tool internally in the county to do more checks.
And if Bill wants to elaborate, because we want to explain why they're not available at this moment. And it's because of Santa Cruz County. Bill, can you take the mic and explain? Yeah, well, I want to make sure I get it recorded.
The thing I want to be clear about is they are public records. There's no question about that. We litigated in Maricopa County that they never had, it's certain that they're public records. The question is whether the public has a right to get them.
So what's the difference there?
Well, they're
Splitting hairs.
The legislature can say some things are public records, but you can't get them.
Okay.
But there's no question they're public records. So there's no question that internally you can't look at them and use them, but at the moment, the law is such that I couldn't come in and say, give them to me. But there's no question they're public records. I want to be sure about that.
And we got Fontes
And
as
there's
a
no
big-
question you've got rights to access and do what you want.
I do agree, they are public records, but they are exempt from the, to be released as a public record.
Okay.
Right.
Under FOIA.
What we're really recommending is the consideration of a tool like AID to do internal work within the county. It's another step and perhaps a law change to say clearly for every county in the whole state that once a county has used a tool like this, and then we're going to release the ballot images to. But the ballot images we were showing you from Wisconsin and Maryland, those are election jurisdictions in other states that have decided to make them publicly available.
And we did that. We convinced Wisconsin and Dane County and other counties. Georgia, we
Tarrant County,
convinced them to
Texas does it.
the whole state. Wisconsin was an easy one. We were up there for the recount. Georgia, I met with a couple of legislators at a conference that we had in California. They went back and got it passed. And now they're completely releasing. And there are more states starting to line up to do this, to hopefully prove to people that you're doing a great job. And that's what we want to show. We want people, the first person who ever did this was out of California, out of Humboldt County. And that election director used to walk around town, and what they did is they bought a digital scanner, which we tried to get Pima County to do in 2006 or 7, to do the same thing, and run all the ballots through a digital scanner, and then use the images. When Humboldt County did that, they found out the default system had a fault. You dropped it. It was all over the country. That's what we discovered when they did it. And so that's what we discovered when they did that. And so it is the future. It really is. We have to, if we're going to have a democracy that we all can believe in and be proud of it.
Yeah.
Commissioner Strigla, question, as I understand the tool, it's to augment the capabilities of the elections department, the equivalent, to verify and to some extent validate their results. That adds a little bit of verification, validation. If it were to go to the next step where the tool and the data was released to the public, are there any jurisdictions that have done that? And what is the advantage of it, the disadvantage? And how has it fixed or improved transparency or hurt the public release of this, I'll say, phenomenal amount of data to a bunch of novices that may misuse the information to generate controversy?
Yeah, that's a good point. But I'd say this. You have the original ballot. You have the original image. The image is hashed. And if somebody wants to take this stuff and manipulate it, as Bill said in a court case one time, have you ever heard of being tarred and feathered? We got the original ballot. We got the original image. And I believe in crowdsourcing the truth. Oh, you found something. And plus, we don't want to release to the public 450,000 images. Precincts. That's our building block. It's like that story that he told me, that after the election at 7 o'clock, people would come in and they would watch the ballots being counted, then they'd punch a hole in the ballot, put it in a string, and I could walk up and look at it. Yeah, that's right. We want to try to get us back to that. We gotta heal the divide.
I think it would take maybe making some more subjective statements as to whether I think it's helped in these other jurisdictions that are doing it already, but I know that Tarrant County, almost all of Idaho, I can't think of the name of the company that Idaho uses.
His name is Friedman, and I'm the one who talked him into building a system 4 years ago.
What is it? Verify?
I
Ballot
forget the
verifier?
name,
or-
yeah, something like that. It was in the New York Times a couple
I
months
would
ago.
say, let's do some work and find out whether Idaho publishing all the ballot images has helped Idahoans feel more comfortable or not, or Tarrant County, Texas, or Idaho's one of those states where the results of the big profile races aren't usually very close, but
I'm just exploring,
Yeah.
not quite go to the public, but go to the political parties with that. Is there jurisdictions that do, that provide this information? to
in
the
between the
political parties?
county only using it internally and then telling everybody else, yeah, we did this and trust us more. Yes, you could have some interim, an interim step would be in a very controlled environment, you allow parties or candidates or somebody with non-disclosure and agreements or whatever to come in and see the same thing. Or as John mentioned, there's a close race between two people and somebody wants to recount the worst way and say, okay, you're gonna come in, we're gonna show you the 8,000 ballots in your race, and we're not gonna make the county count 500,000 ballots again to prove to somebody that the result in this one 8,000 school board race was legitimate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stewart?
Or just this board.
Or just this board.
You know, one of the things I see is you've made the point a number of times today, this is the only county that has a commission like this to do this kind of thing. Certainly in the state of Arizona, I didn't realize it was nationwide, but we'll take you at your word. But getting to the point where you're answering questions of the public that emphasize the legitimacy or the illegitimacy of the election results, the more you can do that, and you're never going to convince everybody that the information you're putting out there is right. It's you know, I've seen too many people sit there and say, well, you know, what if we showed you all of the ballots and your candidate really did lose? And the answer is, I just don't believe it. You know,
True.
there are, you're never gonna make 100% of the people happy 100% of the time. But I think looking at it from a tool perspective, be it at the county elections level or at this commission's level, it just enhances what it is that we're trying to establish as far as our relationship with the voting public and their confidence in the process that we do to elect officials that represent us at all levels of government.
Right.
So, yeah, I think there's some opportunities there. We're not going to come to any conclusions
No,
today.
we're not asking for that.
But
That's
it's
right.
certainly something that we can explore
Yeah.
going forward.
As I was driving, thank you, Commissioner, as I was driving down from Prescott yesterday to be here this morning, I was on the phone with the Yavapai County Election Director. Her and the recorder in Yavapai, they want to release their ballot images so bad, and they're probably going through the same discussions with their legal folks about can we or can the board authorize that? They think they do a really good job in Yavapai, and I agree. And they want to release ballot images to the public, but a step would be do something like a commission here and use an extra tool to just, you know, verify.
Maricopa wants to do the same thing. They came in and testified in the bill, if you remember, and they sent a guy supporting our bill that was vetoed by the governor. It was killed by common cause, and then we tried 2 more times to get it passed, and then at that point,
I had a bill 2 years ago in the Senate. I was in the Senate from 99 to 2007, but then 2 years ago, so 23 and 24, I was in the Senate. And I got this bill, bipartisan support through the Senate and the House, and Hobbs vetoed it. Governor Hobbs vetoed it. Secretary Fontes supported a law change that would clarify that if, or under very controlled circumstances, the Board of Supervisors can release it to the public or just use it as an internal tool. But we're on the cusp of, it's being done in other parts of the country, and I think it's a positive step forward as long as we think it through, and maybe we do an interim step of using the tool back at the commission level before we figure out how do we take it to the public.
if you want to see what Fontes and what happened in that hearing, I'm good at videotaping a lot of things for historic records, and you'll find the testimony of Ken Bennett, and of course, also Bill Reisner, and then Adrian Fontes, 100% behind this, okay? And we did meet with Fontes about Abe. He has seen Abe, okay? We didn't ask him to endorse, because he's got a big plate, but he did tell us this. The Board of Supervisors can work with the images, they can work with Abe, they can do these kind of things, but you can't touch the goddamn original ballots, okay? That's what he's saying. But the digital, go at it. Put the best system you can together to verify to the people. And like you said, right here you'll find the link. Hear what he had to say, because it was tremendous testimony. And he tells a story about he was at an event and he met a guy from the UN and they were talking about elections. And he says, there's one country in this world that has the highest approval rate of their voting system in the world. Mongolia. They publish all their images online by precinct. Is what they do. And we do have a minor problem with the possibility of outing a voter. It's 0.2%
Well,
is what it is. Yeah.
Back where that we had, if you've got 2 people voting on a ballot style, and they both vote for Harris, we know how those 2 people voted.
Right.
But that already exists, because you release already a statement of votes cast.
It's there.
By precinct. And so the statement of votes cast would disclose that already.
Yeah.
Not that we want to accentuate that, but the bill that I got through in a bipartisan vote through the House and the Senate said that any precincts under 25 would be combined into kind of a generic holding place, so that there's no ballot style that could possibly read out any 2 voters or 3 or 1 or whatever.
And we get into that quite intensively when it comes to re-precincting, to make sure that we have a minimum number of voters.
Yeah, fewer situations like this, the better.
And this will help you find them real quick and see these anomalies and see how you can figure it out. The other thing we're totally against is redactions. I want you to know that it's legal in this state to take a picture of your ballot, put it right there, and put it on the internet. If you write your name on your ballot, you outed yourself. Now, you shouldn't have done it, but you outed yourself, so don't tell us, oh my God, you've exposed my ballot. Well, don't sign it, okay? That's a simple fix. We want these images treated like evidence. No redactions. It's evidence.
Any questions?
Okay,
Thank you all. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
giving us this time.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Anybody have any future agenda items that they'd like to see? And again, if you think of something between now and the next meeting, just get a hold of myself or the vice chair or our election support staff, and we'll get those on there. Next meeting is scheduled for March 21st. Anybody have any objections to that? Most of it. March 21st.
No, I'm good with March 21st.
Okay.
One quick comment.
Sure.
I was not able to thank you personally and congratulate you personally on the conduct of the 2024 election because you were, busy doing recounts and things like that. But I thought it went very well. The hiccups were very minor, and I was pleased.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Ditto.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And, thank you all for being here today, and we'll see you next month.
Good. Well, I hope you liked what you saw.
All the
Pretty
good
simple system. There's other ones out there.
All
Yes.
the good stuff.
And I thought it was very good.
Oh, isn't he great?
Present. Because you can.
Oh, you bet. I'm like Trump, I'm a weaver.
Yes, yes.
I'm so glad to have him tell the story, because I weave the story. That's the only thing I got from Trump, is that.
They make other stuff too. But I'm here because
A message from my granddaughter.
Thank you very much. All right.
Thank you, Tiana. Thank you. All righty. Good to see you.
So I kind of met with them and chatted about we got to get the word out. We got to get things straightened out.
One of our